So hi, Rich here. You join me as I show you how I replaced the pads on the Mercedes Vario 612D. I've chocked the front wheels and I'm slacking the wheel nuts off, so I'm going to jack it up and hopefully explain how to do the pads. It's slightly more complicated than it would be with the front. With the front, it's a fairly traditional pair of pads on a disc. On the back, it's a pair of pads on a disc, but also you've got the air activated handbrake, so it's more complicated because we've got to factor in that mechanism. So you'll join me as I work that out and change the pads. Thanks. Okay, so the wheels are chocked, so handbrake is off. So what that does, the air handbrake on this Vario, is it creates a vacuum inside here that moves this lever that activates some type of mechanism, a rod inside here that moves this lower piston. So two pistons, one at the bottom here, one at the top here. We'll see those a bit clearer later in the video, but you need to remove the activation of the handbrake, so it's a question of taking this split pin out here and removing that pin. So let's do that and I'll show you where we get in a few minutes. Okay, so what you can see here is the air handbrake mechanism again, and you'll notice that this pin, I've taken the split pin out of the bottom here and a washer, and this pin kind of rotates freely in there, and that's important. So it's in kind of a neutral position. So the handbrake is off, so this shaft here doesn't have any vacuum applied to it, or any pressure, sorry, and the pin is slack. So when we come to reassemble this in a few hours, that pin needs to be slack when we reassemble it. It's going to be in an entirely different position because these discs are self-adjusting, and we'll discuss that in a while. Thanks a lot. Let's see where we get next. Okay, what we're doing here, the caliper is in two parts. You've kind of got a rear part here and a rear part here, front part here. We want to take this piece off because we're going to have to get to these adjusters down here, the bottom handbrake adjuster. If we didn't have to get to that handbrake adjuster, this job would already be done, but getting that adjuster back involves using an Allen key, and getting into that with the disc in place is tricky. So rather than taking the disc off, it's a question of taking this rear part of the caliper off and slackening this front part off. So this is fastened on with 10mm hexagon studs. So what I do is clean the inside of the stud out with a little screwdriver there, put the hexagon in, having put some lubricant on, and then knock it off. Get some lubricant in there and allow it to soak. 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom, here and here. So let's get those off. So this is what those studs look like. It's a 10mm Allen key that's needed to take them off. You can see there's evidence of Loctite on there, so you're going to have to work hard to get these out. Really good condition Allen key, new one would be perfect. Make sure you clean inside there first with a screwdriver, wire brush, to get any debris out. That will allow the Allen key to seat deep into the stud. And be prepared to use a bit of leverage. I use this piece of inch bar, so I've got 40 centimeters of leverage on there, and that pulled these 4 out fairly easily. You might need to use heat, who knows, but they are fastened in with Loctite, so you're going to have to work hard to get them out, but nice and easy, very unlikely to damage it, provided you use the correct size Allen key and be nice and consistent with it. Try not to hammer. Okay, let's get those 4 out and I'll show you what it looks like. So to take out the brake pads, you need to unfasten these 2 10mm bolts here, one there, one there. I use a brake spanner just to crack those off, and then they'll come out very easily. Once they're out, you'll be able to pull the pads out. Okay, once you've taken those set bolts out from there, simply take that retainer off, and then you've got access to your pads. So just popping that out of there, should be able to get those out fairly easily. One on the back, and then do the same with the front, get those out of there. So by taking out these, or slackening these Allen studs off, one here and 2 at the bottom, we're loosening this half of the caliper. You can see that's moving, and by doing that it just helps you free those pads off, and those pads will come out very easily. You can see the pads do need replacing. There still some meat in them, but this is certainly less meaty than a new one, so I'm looking forward to getting those back in. The brakes were very effective, but I'm looking forward to improving them. So this is the last of those set bolts coming out. That's super, bit of Loctite on those, and that will free off the back half of this caliper. So that's lifted off there, and we set that to one side. It's a heavy piece of metal. You can see where those 4 10mm studs have gone. 1, 2, 3, 4. So what that's revealed is 2 pistons. This upper piston is the hydraulic piston that seems to control most of the braking effect. It's not adjustable, it moves when you push your pedal down. This bottom one, as you can see inside there, I think there's an Allen key deep in the center of the piston, unlike this one, which is hollow. So we need to get to that. Clearly getting to that with the disc here is tricky. So what I'm going to do, rather than messing about removing the disc, is slacken off the other half of the caliper, and I'm going to do that by removing 4 bolts at the back of here, and I'll show you those in a moment. Okay, so this is the back of the caliper, and you can see it slides on these 2 pistons, one here and one here, so it needs to move freely forward and backward. So it's a good opportunity to clean these pistons and put some brake grease on them, so that this moves forward and backward during under braking and gives even pad wear. What we'll do is push that right back, and you can see the Allen key in there, and I have a feeling we're going to be able to get into there. Oh, nearly can get in there. I'm going to try and get into there. If not, I'll slacken the 18mm bolts off the back of this, and that will allow us to get this 8mm Allen key into that adjuster and squash this, or retract this piston back into the caliper. The only way you can retract this is using the Allen key. This one we can retract just by pushing it back and forcing fluid back into the reservoir under the bonnet. Incidentally, I've slackened off the lid on the reservoir and made sure there's not too much liquid in there, not too much brake fluid. So that's something that I probably should have mentioned, but you know what, I'm not a professional mechanic, I'm just showing you how I do it. Okay, so I'm going to try and get the Allen key into there, and it will save us taking the 18mm bolts off the back of here. Okay, so what's happening here, I've progressed a bit since I last did any filming, just by about 15 minutes. I've taken out 3 of these. These are the bolts that hold this part of the caliper onto this part of the caliper, and there are 2 at the bottom and 2 at the top. What I've done is taken those out because the pads had worn to such an extent that I couldn't get the Allen key in here, and it's this lower piston that needs winding back to allow the handbrake mechanism to work here, this lever. So what I'm doing is putting an 8mm Allen key into there. It doesn't just need turning, you've got to push it hard in that way and turn it clockwise, and do it quite slowly. What that's doing is working on a thread, but it's compressing fluid, so do it fairly steadily, allow that fluid to reach equilibrium. So we're doing it fairly steadily. Just remind you, I'm not a professional mechanic. I'm sure the Mercedes guys will do this super quickly, but my experience of this is, having done the other side fine, so I'm showing you on this side because there's no record of it on YouTube or anything, so I thought I'd share it. Anyway, that's what I'm doing. I'm pushing that piston back into there, and this piston has moved back into the caliper already by this much. This is the fluid piston, and this one I'll just push back in with a clamp or by hand, and that will fill the reservoir under the bonnet with fluid. So you'll join me as I've pushed this back. Once I've done that, I'll take the Allen key out and I will refit these 4 bolts. I've just got one of them in at the moment up there, so that this is kind of hanging here. It's pivoting off this top point, so I just find it a bit easier to work with, and I've got these out. I'll put some Loctite on them so they're not going to come out again. Okay, you'll join me when that's fully retracted and I've refitted the rear half of the caliper. Okay, so I've progressed somewhat. The 18mm bolts that run here, let me just get so I can see that. Yeah, the 18mm bolts that are here and underneath it there are back in, and also these 10mm Allen bolts are here, are back in, holding this upper caliper or rear caliper section. This caliper section here slides on pistons. You can just see them inside there, and that centralizes the forcing of the brake. With that pushed back, you can actually access that inside there now with a normal sized 8mm Allen key. I'm sure you could cut down an Allen key to make a stubby leg on there, or in fact buy something a bit shorter. What I did was take the 18mm bolts out the back here, and that allowed me a bit more space, taking all the caliper off. But you don't need to do that, and I bet they don't do that at Mercedes. So I've pushed that back in. This upper caliper here, this upper piston is pushed back in, and the reservoir under the bonnet is full to the brim. This one is pushed back with the Allen key. So now it's a question of putting in the pads. I've gone for genuine Mercedes pads. That'll go in the back there, and the caliper will pull forward. Never done this with one hand. In fact, let me. So that's going to go in there, and then this caliper here, this pad here will go in there. I'll make that look pretty, and you'll see me finish up in a minute. Okay, what I've done here is refitted this retaining plate. This comes with the pads from Mercedes, 10mm set bolts with a bit of thread, easy copper slip on them, and then I've fitted the new sensors. So one in the rear pad, one in the outer pad, pushed into the two contacts, and I've used a couple of cable ties to attach these cables. It's important that they don't hang out here because they'll rub on the wheel, so keep them nice and snug there. I'm happy with that, but as I say, I'm not a professional. I just think that's okay. So the only thing to do now is to connect this. So I'm going to try and explain that to you. Cheers. See you in a bit. So you remember there were a couple of pistons in here. The bottom one was associated with the handbrake, and the top one was more associated with the foot pedal, and the adjustment for the handbrake was in the center of this bottom piston. Well, I've pumped the brake plenty of times with the engine running. I have seen the pedal, experienced the pedal lift, and I've got a really nice high pedal. The disc rotates, so the axle rotates, as you can see there. A little bit of resistance with the new pads, but you would expect that. So what I'm going to do now is adjust the handbrake. It's this lever here. As that lever moves back, it pulls on this mechanism and grips the disc between these two pads at the bottom half of the caliper, and it does that by this lever here moving. I'll go and show you that moving. I'll just put the handbrake. So what I did there was take the handbrake off, and you'll have seen, I expect, this lever here, this move from the air tank there at the back, it extended. So what I need to do is adjust the length of this rod inside here so that the handbrake mechanism is not locking the wheel when the handbrake is off. Fairly simple. So I'm going to take that rubber off, and I'm going to extend that shaft using the nuts inside there so that it meets up with this. I'm not going to have it back here because that would be that's unnecessary. I'm going to just position this where it doesn't quite grip the disc with the pads, but it certainly doesn't rub. And you'll join me when I'm just about to finish that. So just to recap, inside there are two nuts. You can see the shiny nuts, and those are 17mm, and it's a question of backing those two nuts off or unlocking them with two spanners, and then using a larger spanner on these faces here, cracking this off. This then rotates, and it rotates in to shorten the rod, or it rotates out to lengthen the rod, and you match up that with this here so that the split pin that we took out yesterday, in my case, will drop through. And the positioning of that rod is important. Here it's not going to be adjusted enough, whereas back there the disc is going to be locked in position and you won't be able to move. So it needs to be somewhere between there and there. So I'm going to adjust that. Now, to do that properly, I think it's better if I put the wheel on and do it from underneath, because turning the hub using the studs and this here is hard. So I'm going to put the wheel on, it's more representative and will be better. So let me do that. Okay, so I'm underneath the back and I've taken the chocks, taken the supports out from underneath the axle, and it's on the jack still, but the wheel is on off the ground. You can see the back of the job there. The sensors in position quite nicely. I put some red car paint on those bolts just so that very visually I can see and make sure that they're not slackening off. They've got Loctite on, but I'm a bit anal about those kind of things. The reason I came under here was the handbrake. So the wheel turns freely right now, and that's great, and the handbrake is off. In other words, this pin is out of the cylinder, and I think that position is about right. So I've wound this out by taking these lock nuts off. So slacken those lock nuts off and rotated this using this nut here, and I've extended the length of the rod, and I'm going to position it there. So I'm going to put that pin in through there, not ideal with one hand, but you get the idea. That pin is going to drop through the handbrake lever that's on the caliper. It's going to pop out the bottom here, washer on and split pin, just like when we disassembled it. I will then move these lock nuts up the shaft to nip that gasket holder, and I'll extend this rubber seal around this ridge. I'll probably do that with the handbrake on, because then this lever will shorten and it'll be easier to do. And that is then ready for testing. When it comes to testing, I'll test it on a range of different hills. I will drive and make sure the brakes are not binding. I'll check, of course, that the sensor light or the warning light has been corrected. And I think that's it. So hope you've enjoyed this video. I don't have any subscribers, so you could always be a devil and do that. All right, cheers, bye. So the wheel is free to move. That's good. And let's go put the handbrake on. So that's torquing the wheel nuts up just on the handbrake, which is a good guide. Let me just show you quickly underneath as I've finished the so you can see the lever is fully retracted here, and I've managed to put that rubber somewhere near. I'm going to just clip it onto there now, and then the job's done. Split pin in there. Okay, cheers.